Jack Boris. In 2015, over 114.4 million people watched the Super Bowl. This is according to Christian Anderson, a professor at the University of South Carolina in Columbia, South Carolina, and his book, The History of American College Football, published in 2021. Everyone in this room has watched a football game, but very few of us actually understand the history behind the sport. Football is a very complex sport with a long history that's played at many different levels. First, I will start by discussing the beginning of football in high school. Then I will talk about how it started in college, and finally how it spread to the professional world. Let's start with the beginning of football in high school. According to Kathleen Belinsky, a professor at the Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania, in her book, No Game for Boys to Play, published in 2019, the first football game was in 1863. High school football actually started out as a club sport, so it had no affiliation with high schools at all. And by the 1880s, nearly every town in America had a football club. However, due to its popularity at the turn of the century, high schools began to recognize it as an official sport. In the 1910s, many high schools with football programs began to ban their football programs due to the violence of the sport. However, they quickly reinstated them, and by the 1930s, nearly every town or every high school in America had a football team. When World War II struck, football was used in schools and in Fayette programs as a way to toughen up boys and get them in shape for the military. After World War II, the popularity of football continued to grow with the economic boost that our nation saw. Now that we've discussed the beginning of football in high school, let's look at how it started in college. The first college football game was played in 1869. Football in college started out as a mix between rugby and soccer, and it really gained popularity in Ivy League schools such as Princeton and Harvard. Football's popularity grew greatly, as did the violence of the sport. By the 1880s, they oftentimes had to have police officers patrol the sidelines to keep fans in check and to keep players from killing each other. At the turn of the century, football's popularity was growing, but so was the violence and the brutality of fans. In the 1900 Thanksgiving Day disaster, over 20 fans were killed and hundreds more were injured when this roof collapsed, raining thousands down on a glass factory. According to Richard Chaput, a professor of history at the University of Florida in Orlando, Florida, in his book NFL Football, A History of America's New National Pastime, published in 2019, over 11 players were killed on the field of play in 1905. However, college football's popularity continued to grow, and in the 1930s, new reforms brought more civility and less violence to the game. College football was affected greatly when World War II struck. College football players were not drafted into the military. However, college football was seen on the home front as something for people to rally around to support our nation. After World War II, college football's popularity continued to grow, and in 1969, they celebrated their 100th season. Now that we've looked at the beginning of football in both college and high school, let's look at how it spread to the professional world. The first professional football games were played in the 1890s in Ohio and Pennsylvania, with the Dayton Triangles from Ohio being the first professional football team. Professional football started out much like high school football did, being a club sport, and the players were not paid. However, this quickly changed with the turn of the century as they began paying players, and this was an outrage among fans and players. Professional football was looked down upon by the upper class and by college players. However, the blue-collar workers loved it because the games were on Sundays, which is the only day that factory workers had off. In the 1910s, many teams began charging admittance into their games, and in 1920, the American Professional Football League was formed. In 1922, the name was changed to the National Football League, or NFL as we know it today. When World War II struck, NFL football was greatly affected. Almost 30% of NFL football players were drafted into the military, and a few even gained medals of honor. Football's popularity in the NFL also grew because many teams began playing the national anthem at the beginning of games. After World War II, professional football's popularity continued to grow, and according to Brad Schultz, a professor of journalism and a retired sports media specialist, in his book, The NFL's Pivotal Years, published in 2021, 1969 is the year that NFL Films was created, and after that, professional football's popularity only grew. Now that we've looked at the beginning of football in high school, how it started in college, and finally how it spread to the professional world, football is a very complex sport with a long history that's played at many different levels. In 2015, over 114.4 million people watched the Super Bowl. Hopefully now when you watch the Super Bowl, you can better appreciate the history of the sport.